Some of you have the HUD, some of you don't. So I've resed one of my HUDs next to me so that you guys can kind of follow along because we're going to talk about buttons and such. So that you can see what I'm talking about since you don't have one of your own to refer to. Okay. Does anybody not have a HUD ready to go? Those of you that actually own one, unpacked and ready to go. There are notes in the little box beside me, the little cat and mouse box beside me. If you just on it, it'll give you a card with some notes on it. It's kind of a summary of what I'm going to be talking about during the class, and then if you want to add your own notes into it, I highly encourage you to do that. In fact, I personally keep a cheat sheet, what I call a cheat sheet for the artiste, for things that I do just so that I have something as a reference that I can refer to in case I get stuck. It's frequently. It's crap sometimes. So, okay. So obviously I'm going to be talking in voice. Hopefully you can. Whether you talk in voice or type is up to you. I just ask that you keep your mic off so there's no background noise for other people while I'm talking. If you have a question, you can type the @ symbol in local, and then I'll call on you as soon as I'm done rambling on what we're talking about. And I highly encourage everybody to ask questions. There are no dumb questions, especially when it comes to the artiste. Don't worry about it being a dumb question. Trust me, I think I've asked every stupid question under the sun, as Yummy can attest, while learning this HUD. Sometimes it's my own fault. Sometimes it's just not clear to me. So, but ask questions, because 9 times out of 10 is probably a question that somebody else wants the answer to, but doesn't want to ask. Okay. Okay. So let me start off. I kind of want to start off with a little brief history of the HUD. Yummy started doing this years ago. She was trying to do some automated stripping and emoting for, and as it has evolved, it's changed, and she's incorporated all kinds of new to it and continues to do so. But the aim of it is to help automate. So if you like to press a lot of buttons while you're dancing, this isn't the HUD for you. It's not designed to lead large group dances. So if you to lead 50 plus dancers in a dance, not the HUD for you. However, if you're a solo performer and you want a tool that will help you do more in your solo performances, then this is the HUD for you. You can do small group dances with a HUD. You can do couples dances, and you can do groups of dances up to 9 dancers. You can do more than that, but that gets a little bit more complicated, and so I'm not going to cover that in this class. We're going to stick to just some basics in this. But I have found, using this HUD myself and kind of talking with Yummy and listening to what other people have done, the biggest key to, I think, people feeling successful with this HUD is to give you little successes along. This isn't a tool that you're just going to pick up and in an hour you're going to be doing everything. It's just not possible. But I'm going to give you the basics, and then hopefully from there you can read and learn and experiment and all of the things. Because I use it, but I know that I have only there are some major differences that it takes a little bit to get used to, especially compared to the other dance tools that are popular right now. In addition, one of the cool things about the HUD, but on the flip side, something that can be frustrating about the HUD, is that there's generally more. Okay. Is anybody else having problems hearing me? Okay. Let me take a quick break, you guys, and get my technical person in here, figure out what's going on. It shouldn't be breaking up, so let me check just some here. Right back. So where was I? History, solo dancing. Okay, so what I had just said was that the HUD provides more than one way to do something. Okay, so I'm going to show you one way to do something, and then there'll be other ways to do it. But if I give you at least one way, then you know you have one way to accomplish something. Okay? So, in this course, over the next 3 weekends, we're going to cover sequences using the HUD to dance. We're going to cover the events, which is kind of unique to the artiste. We're going to cover how to do emotes if you use those, and chat commands, which I'm sure most of you will want to use, and how to add and remove items. You can do all of those things with just the Artiste HUD. And then at the end, I'm also going to talk a little bit about the stage site. Okay? So, the HUD is very complicated, so in some instances, I may have you set something up a certain way without explaining why. This isn't because I don't want to explain it to you. It's just because it gets really complicated and I'm not the expert. Yummy is. So a big thank you to her for being here, because if I don't know the answer to something, I'm going to throw it in her court. But going back to when I tell you to do something, it's to keep you from getting confused. That, for me, was my biggest stumbling block in learning to use the Artiste, was that there were so many ways to do things. I just needed that one way that I could make it work. And then once I knew I had that one way to make it work, it was a lot easier to go back and say, okay, well, how else could I do this? Or this time in this routine, I need to do it a little bit differently for whatever reason. Okay? It is kind of a new way of thinking, especially when we get into talking about events. The HUD is very complex. And like I said, and Yemi has said, I think the key to learning to use this HUD successfully is making sure that you have those little successes along the way. And that's kind of how I built this course, is to help you have those little successes along the way so that you feel comfortable and competent when you use the HUD. Okay? Because personally for me, I hate nothing more than buying something and then feeling like a complete idiot because I can't figure out how it works. Okay? So hopefully this class will help you to not feel that way. Okay. If you bought the big package, the gold package, I would encourage you to play with the HUD. I would encourage you to read all of the stuff, that the manuals and everything that Yummy provides. Play around with some things, read some more, play around some more. I don't know that anybody besides Yummy actually knows everything that this HUD can do. So it is just a matter sometimes of experimentation and going, well, how could I do this? Or can I do this? 99% of the time, can you do it? Yes. Yummy has put so many things in this HUD that it's really incredible. Not just the HUD, but once we get into talking about the palette and everything. And as you use it, the more you use it, the more it will make sense. Okay? I promise. Okay, so let's go over the basic buttons on the HUD. If you have it and you have one unpacked that you can attach and wear so you can look at it while I'm going over these, that would be great. If you don't have one, you can just look at the one next to me. Winnie, you have a question? Magnifying glasses? Can you not? On my HUD or the one on your screen? You can adjust it. It's modifiable. Just adjust it and make it bigger. I didn't think it was teeny. Honestly, think mine's probably about the same size as my PD HUD on my screen anyway. Okay. So the basic buttons on the HUD. Oh yeah, sorry, I'm on my PC and I have a huge screen, so I hardly use my laptop anymore because I'm blind. Okay, so let's look at the buttons on the HUD. Okay, we're going to look at the S button. If you push the S button, it will run the currently active dance sequence. Okay, so there's lots of stuff preloaded in your HUD on the note cards. So if you push the button, it should do something. Okay. The minus button underneath the S button, underneath the star, is the minimize button. The F button at the bottom toggles on and off the playing of the initial or first pose, hence the F. I don't ever use that button. I generally put all of my poses in my sequence path. Okay, it's there, I promise. Okay, so the F button is the initial or first pose. The A button toggles on and off the final or after pose. Okay, so whether you use these two or not is entirely up to you. I don't use them. Like I said, personally, I generally put my beginning and ending poses in the actual sequence itself. However, if there's a case where maybe you want to play the first pose and then your sequence because you don't know how long is going to be in between, or you're not sure where the music is going to end and you want to hit that final pose exactly on a beat, so you're going to do it as you listen, then you could use these buttons for that. Okay. The back green arrow is the rewind button. Okay. It stops the HUD first, then moves everything back to the beginning. So hang on one second. I got somebody who wants to come late. Send her the landmark real quick. Okay. So the back arrow button is the rewind button, like I said. I'm sorry, Yummy, I didn't mean to interrupt. The A button was created for what? Yeah, so you can listen to the music, and then if you, rather than programming it into your, as part of your sequence, then you could use that button. Okay, so back green arrow is a rewind button. The red square is the stop button. Okay, it stops the HUD, and then it will tell you that it's rewinding it as well. Okay, the forward green arrow is the play button, which is what you're going to push when you want to start your sequence or your auto FX or whatever it is that you want to get started. Okay. The forward green arrow with the line is the manual step button. It is currently non-functional. Yummy said that a lot of people were not using it, and honestly, I've never used it either, so you can ignore that one for now. Okay, the gold button inside the star is actually pretty helpful. It's a stopwatch. So if you're trying to time something out, then you can click that button and it will tell you the number of seconds that has elapsed since you pressed play. So if you're trying to time out an add or remove, a particle effect, some, maybe an animated texture, I don't know, whatever you have going on in your dance and you're not quite sure what time you need, then you can use that to see where in your sequence you need to make that happen. Okay. And then the last button doesn't look like a button, but the Artiste logo. And if you click on the logo itself, that will bring you up the blue menu where you can do all kinds of stuff. Okay. You can do most things, probably all things, via the menu, the blue pop-up menus, rather than doing them through note cards. I personally find it's easier to understand and keep track of what I'm doing if I just do it myself with the note cards. So that would be one of those things where you're just going to kind of have to experiment and see what works better for you. Okay. All of the other buttons that you see, the ones, the auto FX, the auto sequence, all of those down the line, they're going to either be red or green, or in the case of the auto access, they'll be yellow. Okay. Red means that that function is not currently active on the HUD. You just have to click on the button to toggle it on and off. Okay. This comes in extremely handy when you only want to test certain parts of a routine. So for example, if I just want to test my sequence, I'll turn everything to red except the auto sequence and see how my dance goes. Maybe I want to turn off the auto sequence. I don't want to dance, but I want to turn on my auto adorns and see if my add removes are going the way that I want them to. Maybe I just want to test my emotes and see if my emotes are going off the way that I want them to. Okay, so pretty handy. The auto access one, you cannot toggle. However, it's kind of a special case, so we'll cover that one later. Okay. Now, how many of you typically use the PD HUD at the moment for your sequences? Maybe I should ask who doesn't use the PD HUD. I think most of you guys probably that dance use the PD HUD. Okay, so there are some similarities and there are some differences. Okay, so my advice to you, for those of you who use the PD HUD, is just to be aware that sometimes when you do things and expect certain things to happen, it's because of your experience with the PD HUD, and it doesn't always work the way that you think it will. Because I've had that happen to me. Okay. Unlike the PD HUD, because in the performance director, everything goes on one note card. Your dance sequence, your chats, your emotes, your commands for adding and removing things, those all go on one note card. In the Artiste, they're all on separate note cards. Okay. So you kind of have to figure out what goes where. And I'm not going to cover every single thing that is inside the HUD. Am I cutting out? I'm not going to cover every single thing that is inside the HUD, but we will cover certain things that you guys are going to use a lot of. Okay. Like the PD HUD, you only load the animations that you need into the HUD. Okay, so this isn't like a bar where you're going to load 4,000 animations. Okay, you're just going to load the animations that you need. I generally create my sequence using the bar first. I record it, kind of get my timings down, and then I'll copy that sequence into the Artiste. Okay, for sequences, it's not like the PD HUD with the timeline. It's the old format for the bar and the huddles where you have the name of the dance, the pipeline, and then the time. Okay. Something I want to mention before we start kind of playing around with sequences is that for most of the functions of the Artiste to work, you have to have RLV enabled. You never used the bar or the huddles path, is that what you meant? Okay. Well, it's just the format for dancing. If you were going to, thank you, Winnie. If you're going to, it's just the dance animation, the pipe figure, and then the time that you want the animation to play. It's the same thing as the PD HUD, it's just flipped, really. Okay. It'll make sense when we get there. Okay, so you need to have RLV enabled. So is there anybody who has the HUD who doesn't have RLV enabled? Because you have to re-log in if you don't have it working. Okay, I'm going to assume the silence means that everybody has RLV enabled. Okay. Because I actually ran into that. I was testing it, and I had to be on somebody else's computer because mine was not working, and RLV wasn't enabled, and things weren't working, and I was getting really frustrated, and it was my own fault. Okay, so if you have a copyable version of the HUD, you would res a copy of it, and then I generally change the name to something that has to do with whatever performance I'm doing. Generally, I name mine whatever the name of the song is or something. Okay, so you have to res it in order to change the name, but okay. So if you have the HUD, go ahead and wear it if you're not already. And then let's see if we can make ourselves dance. Okay, like I said, the HUD comes loaded with some animations and a sequence. So try pressing the S button and see if you dance. Woohoo! I see people dancing. Okay, and then to stop dancing, just press the S button again. Okay, so if you have a sequence loaded, that's a simple way that you can test your sequence. All you do is press that S button. You don't have to press play. You can just press that S button and it'll run you through your sequence. Okay? Okay, now let's take a peek actually inside the HUD. Okay, so edit your HUD and go to the Contents tab. Don't panic. There's lots of stuff in there. We're just going to take it one thing at a time, okay? Shouldn't have to wait too long for it to open, I hope. My Artiste opens way faster than my bar, so. Okay, so. Isn't? Okay, good. Okay, so you're going to see various note cards, you're going to see some animations, and you're going to see a ton of scripts. Okay? So, for now, what we're going to focus on is the sequence note cards. Okay? So if you scroll down to the S's, you'll see there are 5, but there's 4 sequence note cards. Sequence 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? For a solo dance, like if you're the only person that's going to be dancing, or if you're doing a group dance but everybody's doing the same sequence, there's no breakouts, then you only need to worry about the sequence 1 card. Okay? And there's, like I said, there's lots of stuff already set up in there as examples so that you can look at things. So if you open the sequence 1 note card, you'll see a sequence already in there. Okay. Now, unlike the PD HUD, you can only have up to the 4 different dance sequences because we only have those 4 note cards in the PD HUD, which sounds limiting, but it really isn't if you stop and think about it. Like I said, if you're dancing a group of dances, group of dancers and you're all doing the same dance, you can put everything on the sequence 1 note card. If you have 2 groups where you want them to do one thing and another, then you put one on sequence 1 and you put one on sequence 2. Okay, so it's not as limiting as it sounds to say that there's only 4 note cards. Okay. Okay, so we have the sequence 1 note card open, and you see the default sequence, which is what you all just danced when you press the S button. Okay, so this would be where you enter your own sequence that you want to dance. You always leave the first and last line. So where it says trace off and in, you always want to have those in there, and your sequence, whatever your dance sequence is, goes in between those two. Okay, so if you wanted to insert your own sequence, let me grab a copy of it here so I can put it in local and you can see what I'm... So if I wanted to put in my own sequence, it might look something like this. Okay. And, you know, depending on how, I think I have 10, 15, maybe 20 at the most animations that I'll put in, and that's probably only 20 if I'm doing, you know, some sits or some lays or some beginning and ending poses that I would have that many. I generally wouldn't have that many. Okay. So that's where you would put your sequence. Okay. So you would put in your sequence, whatever changes you want to make, save the note card, and then close it. Zed, you have a question? No, they're not required because I don't have them all the time. In fact, I just noticed probably a couple weeks ago that hers had extra spaces and mine didn't. But if there's no spaces, it'll work just fine. Okay, so once you have your new sequence in, that is a good question, and I'm making a note so I can put that on in my notes for next time I teach this. Save the note card and close it. And then in order to load the new sequence in the HUD so that we would dance it, we would need to reload the sequence 1 note card. Now, you could reset your HUD, but there's a quicker way to do it. So instead of setting reset, if you click on the words the artiste and bring up your blue menu from your HUD, and then there is a button that says reload dances right next to the reset button. You can press that, and you can go ahead and press it now. It won't hurt anything. And then it will read your note card, and you'll get some local chat about what it's doing. If you don't understand all of it, don't worry about it. I don't understand a lot of it, and I use it just fine. And then once all the chatting is done, it will have reloaded your note card. Okay, and that's as simple. Okay. So now we danced already using the S button. Okay. But of course, most of the time what you're going to do is use the play button. Okay. So in order for the sequence that you have loaded, whatever that would be, and today we're just going to use the default, in order for it to play, you need to make sure that auto sequence is active. So how do we make the auto sequence active on our HUD? Yep, you click the button to green. That's exactly it. Okay, so you would just, on your HUD, click the little button next to auto sequence and turn it so that it's green. Okay, so make sure that yours on your HUD is green, and then click the play button and see if you dance. Woohoo! I see people dancing. Okay. So when you want to stop dancing, just click the stop button. Okay. So when you're using the HUD, you can manually change these buttons from red to green. But of course, you don't want to have to remember to do that all the time. So if you want to make it so that these buttons that you want stay green all the time, we need to go in and change some things on one of the note cards. So if you go back into the contents of your HUD and scroll down until you find the note card called Config, okay, and open that note card. Open the note card and then scroll down until you see the section that starts with lights, okay? Here under lights is where you're going to see all of those buttons listed, okay, and what states they're in. If they're on, then your buttons will be green. If they're off, then your buttons will be red. So you would simply change the off to on or vice versa depending on what lights you want to be on all the time for that particular HUD, okay? So for everything, I'm going to assume you're going to want auto sequence to be on rather than off. So you just go down to auto sequence and change the on after it to an off. Off to on, okay? And any other changes that you want to make. If you wanted your auto adorn on, if you wanted your auto emote on, your auto FX, whatever buttons you want on, you would change the off to on. Save the changes from your config card, okay? Now, this is a big thing to remember. Anytime you make changes to the config card, in order for the changes to stick, you need to reset your HUD, okay? So I'm going to change mine on my auto sequence from off to on, and I'm going to save my config card, okay? And then in order to reset your HUD, you click on the Artiste to get your blue menu, and then click the reset button. When you click the reset button, you're going to get a bunch of chat. It's owner-only chat, so don't worry about other people seeing it, but you're going to get a bunch of chat as it runs through all of its checks and figures out what it needs to do. Okay? It'll ask you, are you sure you really want to do this? Just say yes, and then let it do its thing. And I'm getting all kinds of pop-ups because mine isn't attached and it doesn't like that, but you shouldn't have any problems with yours. And when it gets done with the reset, you should get a line that says it's ready. Okay, so again, I would encourage you to make a note on your note card. Anytime that you make a change to the config note card, you need to reset your HUD in order for your changes to stick, okay? Okay, so everybody should have auto sequence hopefully turned on now. So, when we dance with the HUD, there are two different ways that you can make yourself dance. One I use all the time, one I don't use at all, okay? But there's two different ways to do it. One way will make you start dancing as soon as you hit play, and I'm going to assume that's what most of us are used to because that's how the PD HUD works. When you hit play, you immediately start dancing, okay? Because we're listening for that musical cue, you hit play and you start dancing, okay? The other method will allow you to start the dance at a certain point after pressing play, okay? Like I said, I don't really use that one because 99.9% of the time as soon as I hit play, I want to start dancing, but you don't have to. There is another option if that's something that you need to do, okay? And we'll get into that later, but for now, we're going to talk about the first method, okay? So if you go back into your HUD and go into the contents and find the note card called sequences, not one of the numbered one, but just the one called sequences, okay? Open that note card, and the third line down, you'll see an entry called Sequence on Play, followed by the number 1. Okay? If your note card looks like this, where it says Sequence on Play 1, your sequence will start immediately as soon as you press play. So as soon as you press play on that HUD, you're going to start dancing or walking or whatever it is that you have programmed into your sequence, whether it's a pose or whatever. Your animations will start immediately on pressing play. You can change that number to a 0 so that your dance doesn't start until the time that you specify. Okay? So remember that it's an option. But for now, we're just going to leave it as a 1 so that our sequence will start as soon as we press play. Okay? And this is the default, so if that's what you want to do, you don't have to change any of this. Okay? You can just leave it this way, and that's how it will be. Okay? Does anybody have any questions on that part so far? Or questions about anything else? Am I going too fast? No questions? Okay. So we're going to assume, like I said, that you want your... No, class isn't over, Path. No, class isn't over. I'm just making sure everybody's on the same page and I didn't lose anybody. Okay. So, like I said, we're going to... Oh, that's a good point. I'll ask again, though. Okay, so I'm going to assume everybody wants to start dancing as soon as we press play. So something else you need to be able to do when you perform is to cache your dances. The artiste, of course, has a way to do that, but it does it a little bit differently. Okay, it caches your dances by playing each animation for 1 second, and then it runs through the animations for a second time. Okay, so it may take a couple seconds longer than you're used to for it to run through the animations. It's only going to run through the animations that are loaded in the HUD, so it shouldn't take that long, okay, because you should only have the ones loaded that you're actually going to use. So if you click on the artiste logo or words again to bring up your blue menu, and then in the first column, the second one down, you should see dances. If you click on that, and then you'll get another blue menu, and first column, the third one down, there's a button that says cache dances. Go ahead and click that. Okay? And you're going to see yourself start running through all of the animations that are loaded in the HUD. Okay? And you'll get chat that tells you when it's finished that it has finished caching however many animations are in your HUD. Okay? Anybody have any questions about how to cache? Okay. So we've talked about sequences. The other note card that I want to talk about is the events note card. And like I said, events is kind of something that's unique to the artiste. I still don't know that I have my head wrapped around it. I understand how it works. It's just not necessarily how I think when I choreograph. So some of you may get used to it much faster than I do. I still struggle with it a little bit. So if you do, don't feel bad. And if you get it right away, I hate you. Just so you know. Okay. So when Yummy was developing the HUD, one of the things that she was thinking of was that certain actions would be tied to events, or there'll be certain places in your routine where something is going to happen. Okay, so maybe at a certain point in your song, you want an effect to go off, or you want a piece of clothing to go off. Those are events. Okay? you can have up to 20 events. So if you open your events note card, what you're going to see, go ahead and open it up, is you're going to see that trace off line. You're going to see a line that says duration. You're going to see 3 events listed, and then you're going to see that end. Okay? When you put in your own events, the format needs to follow the format here. The first number is the number of the event, followed by a comma. Then the event name in quotation marks, followed by a comma, and then the time for each event. Okay? So it's not supposed to be double quotes. I think it's just a typo, Cherry. So you can delete that second quotation marks. Yes, it would be the time that you want something to happen in your, yes. Okay. So let me get a little bit further, and hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. Okay. So looking at the example that Yummy's provided in the note card, event number 1 will fire or happen 10 seconds after you press play. Okay? So if you want something to happen 10 seconds in, that's what your first event would look like. Okay? Event 2 will fire 10 seconds after that, or 20 seconds after pressing play. Event 3 will fire 10 seconds after that, or 30 seconds after pressing play. Okay? That's how the duration method works. Okay? Does everybody understand that? If you use duration, it's a cumulative time. And yes, as far as I know, it's always listed as seconds, Karina. Is that true, Yummy? I've never seen it not be seconds. Okay. So it's seconds. Okay. Well, this is where you're telling the HUD that something is going to happen at this time. It depends on what 2 things you need to happen. So say you wanted to have an emote happen at the same time as you wanted a piece of clothing to come off, let's just say for an example, okay? You would put the emote in one note card and the piece of clothing coming off in a different note card, so they would still happen on event number 2, for example. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. And like I said, you can have up to 20 events. Yeah, you'd give them the same event note card and tell it, but they would be on 2 different note cards. So like I said, it's a little confusing at first because everything is not in the same place on one note card like it is with the PD HUD. But once you figure out what goes where, it does make sense. You can have up to 20 events, but yes, you can have more than one thing happen on each event, depending on what it is that you want to happen. Okay. And remember, your sequence is on a different note card, so that's independent of your events. No, it can't be triggered manually because that's kind of the whole concept behind the HUD is that you press play and then it kind of does everything for you. So it does require some front loading on your part to kind of work through your sequence, work through your performance and what you want to happen when. The upside of that is that once you put all that work in, when you go somewhere and perform, it's going to perform the way you want it to. You press a button and you go. Okay? You mean if Yeah. Not quite that automated, Zed, but yes. Do you mean if you would like need to start over, for example, Cherry? Like if something went wrong with the stream and you needed to do a restart? Okay. Yeah. If it happens, and it does, of course, because it's SL, if you would need to start over, you would simply stop the HUD, and then reset anything you need to reset. So, if everything's automated, for example, just when I was rehearsing a performance and I was going through it, I got to maybe my 5th event and something went wrong and I needed to start over. So I had to go back and put back on, the pieces that I had taken off. I might have had to reset a couple of particle effects or something. But it's really no different than restarting with a PD HUD. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Zed. I'm going to throw that question to Yummy because I don't think it has an effect. I mean, we pressed play and we danced, so everything seemed fine. Okay, so it won't fire properly. Is it going to give you a chat notice of that, Yummy, or is that just something that you'll have to discover when you go back in and look at your events note card? Okay. And odds are, when you do this, it doesn't just skip, it'll stop, won't it, Yummy? Okay. I haven't had any issues, Zed, in using my events note card, but what I generally will do is just like I fix the typo and then I would copy and paste so that I had maybe 10 or 15 events and change the numbers, so that they were all numbered correctly. But I've not had an issue. But yeah, I mean, events is the most critical note card because that's what that note card is what is telling the HUD when to do things. And everything else is tied to this. So if this one is wrong, things are not going to work the way that you expect. Okay? Let me see if I can dig up an example really quickly of one of my an event is just a time in your dance that something happens. Whether that's a bucket of paint, whether that's you taking off a piece of clothing, whether it's an emote, it's just a point in your performance where something happens. You don't have to reset the HUD in order for the note card changes to take effect, but you do have to reset or reload that note card, okay? So if you made changes to your event note card, for example, then you would click on the Artiste words to bring up your menu, and then you can see on that first menu where it says reload auto FX, reload adorns, reload events, reload dances. We changed our event note card. We're going to reload events, and that will force the HUD to reread that note card and put your changes into effect. Okay? And that's the same way with adorns or auto FX, which we'll talk about later. Like I said, the only time that you absolutely have to reset the HUD itself is if you make changes to that config note card. Okay? So I generally make the changes that I need to make for my config note card, reset everything, and then I will play with it and get my performance the way I want. And then when I'm completely done, I'll do another HUD reset at the end. Yummy? So really for events, you can have as many or as little as you need. Right. So maybe you're doing a performance and you only have 3 things that are going to happen. Then you might only need 3 events. Okay. You might have more than that going on, and so you might need more than that. But given that you can make several things happen at once, like we said, then you may not need as many events. I personally, honestly, for most of mine, I will just go in and give myself an event every 10 or 15 seconds. Just because I don't quite think in terms of events when I'm choreographing something. Mine's, the way I do things is more on the fly, I think, than Yummy does it, or maybe lots of other people do it. It's hard to know because you don't watch somebody else choreograph something. So all I can tell you is how I do it. And then you guys will have to figure out for yourself what makes more sense for you. For most of the time when I make an event card, like I said, I will make somewhere between 10 and 15 events every 10 or 15 seconds. And then as I go through and I want things to happen, I can update or change the time of the events, how long I want them to last and things like that, so that stuff happens the way I want it. But I don't generally have enough of a formed idea in my head when I start choreographing that I know exactly when I want something to happen, because that's just not the way that I think. I wish it was, but it is. So this will be one of those cases where you just kind of have to try it and see for yourself, you know? Okay. Any other questions about events so far? Everybody with me? Okay. So what we've been talking about and the way the example is set up here, no, it's fine, Path. Everything else I would say is tied to the events note card. The events note card defines when things are going to happen. What things are going to happen depends on what it is you want to happen. Do you want a piece of clothing to come off? That's going to go on one note card. Do you want an emote to show? That's going to go on a different note card. Do you need to send out a chat command for a particle effect? That's going to go on a different note card, okay? So those things are what are tied to the events. The events note card is what defines the events. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so in looking, do I want so yes, if that was an event that you wanted to happen, okay? Okay, so in looking at the events note card, the default one that's included, it is the duration method. However, there is another method that you can use. Okay, so using the duration method, it's cumulative like Winnie said. Event number 1 happens 10 seconds after pressing play. Event number 2 happens another 10 seconds after that, so a total of 20 seconds after pressing play, and so on, for however many events you would have, okay? However, you can change it to a different method, and that's called the elapsed method. So rather than having where it says duration, you would type in elapsed in all capitals, okay? And that's going to tell the HUD that you want to use the elapsed event method. The elapsed method is probably closer to the timeline from the PD, So if you change, for example, nothing on this note card but duration to elapsed, you're going to confuse the HUD and it won't work. Because when it's elapsed, it's going to look at it and say, okay, event number 1 needs to happen at 10 seconds in. Event number 2 needs to happen at 10 seconds in. And so with the elapse method, the HUD will think that you want all 3 events to happen at 10 seconds after you press play. Does everybody follow me? Okay. So if you changed it to elapsed, rather than having 10 after all of these, you would change it to be more like the PD timeline. And if you actually wanted everything to happen every 10 seconds, event number 1 would happen at 10 seconds, event number 2 would happen at 20, event number 3 would happen at 30. Okay, so in that respect, it's more like the PD timeline. So if elapsed makes more sense to you, then you can do it that way. I know that Yummy in her tips and tricks that she sent out just a little bit ago, her note card that she sent out not too long ago, she said that most people use elapsed. I think honestly I use duration 90% of the time just because that's been the default, but if it makes more sense to you to use elapsed, then use what makes more sense to you. Okay? Since duration is the default, we're just going to stick with duration for now. Okay? And you can name your events anything you want. They don't have to be named event number 1, event number 2, event number 3, like they're named here. You can name them something else. So, let me find my note here. You might have an events note card that looks something like this. So still using the duration method, I have a 10-second intro, and then the first chorus happens 10 seconds after that, and then maybe my song has a tempo change 10 seconds after that, okay? It doesn't matter what the names of them are. You do need the quotes, by the way. I didn't know that when I put this in there, but you do need the quotation marks around the event names. But you can name them anything you want, okay? Does anybody have any questions about that? Zed? Why is the format for the events different than the sequence note card? Is that what you're asking? Because that's the way Yummy set it up. That's my answer. I'll let Yummy answer that one, Zed, because honestly, I don't know. That's just the way it's set up, and so that's how I do it. So the answer is because, Zed. Okay. Do you have a question, Path? The spaces do matter, Zed. There shouldn't be any spaces when you're doing events. And the notes to self, Path, if you put them in quotation marks like that as the name of an event, I would assume that the HUD is just going to think that's the name of the event since it's inside the quotation mark. If you made it a note to yourself, just that line, starting with a slash, then, okay. If you just made that, then the HUD basically is going to ignore the line. But it's a note to you when you're looking at the note card if you need something in there to remind yourself of something. But the HUD will ignore it. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so like I said, you can use as many events as you need, up to 20. And like I said, I think I'm kind of unusual in that I generally use somewhere between 10 to 15 events for a 3 to 5 minute routine. Lots of people may not use that many. It just depends on what you have going on. And like I said, how many things you have happening in your routine. Okay? Okay. So that's the end of today's class. So put your thinking caps on. Pat said that this is when everybody comes up with their questions. So if you have any questions, I'm going to talk about what I want you to do in preparation for the next section, the next class. Okay? So everybody gets a little bit of homework. For the next session, what I want you to do is to create a dance sequence and put it in your sequence 1 note card. Okay? And it can be whatever kind of dance you want. If you want to use a sequence that you've already used before in a performance, if you want to create something new, I don't care. It's up to you. Change your events note card to include at least 5 events, but leave the method set as duration. Okay? So next class, I'll have everybody kind of demonstrate their sequences so we can make sure that everything's working right. And then in the next session, we'll talk about how to do emotes and chat commands using your AutoFX, and we'll talk about adding and removing items using the Auto Adorn. Okay? So, does anybody have any questions before you all take off? Don't panic. And as you guys, those of you who actually have the HUD, as you're doing this, if you have any questions, please feel free to IM me. I'll be more than happy to help you out. Create a dance sequence and have at least 5 events on your note card. That's all you have to do. Yeah, and Yummy is really good about helping you with anything. So if you get stuck anywhere, you have any questions, please just IM me or IM Yummy. It's not a big deal for me to take a few seconds and help you guys out with whatever you need. She has the patience of a saint, no lie. I have, since I bought the silver HUD and now buying the gold, when I was trying to learn how to do this, I mean, literally she would come and spend an hour with me helping me figure out what it is I needed to do. Okay? So, like I said, I highly encourage you to kind of play around, read the manuals, play around, read the manuals, and just keep doing that. The more that you use it, the more comfortable you'll get with it. And just as an FYI, it does work with Spot. So since we haven't got to the movers and won't get to the movers in this course, if you want to use it to perform, and I highly encourage you to, just to get used to it, you can use it with Spot as movers. repeat which part? Just that I would encourage you, if you use Spot and you do performances, try using it in a performance, or at least maybe take pieces of performance that you've already done and try using the Artiste with Spot as your mover. And that way you can see kind of how it works, because it's a dance HUD. So yeah, use Spot as the mover and the Artiste as your dance HUD. You can make them work together just like you can with the bar. So if you don't have any questions, you're free to go. If you have questions, feel free to hang around and ask. I'll be happy to stay. You're not sure what it is. Well, I'm not sure I can answer it, Zed, but I'll try. You're very welcome. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and listening to me blather on. The note card is in the box next to me, if anybody didn't get it. You can, let's see, I'm trying to think. You can likely set it up the same as the bar, where you tell the mover to listen and then you give it a chat command via the Artiste. I've not done that. When I have used, on the few occasions that I've used the Artiste with Spot, I just used the little choreography mover HUD, and I just pressed play on the Artiste and then immediately pressed play on the mover, and it worked fine. If you read up on the, I mean, I found using just the two HUDs, it was 2 clicks. It wasn't that difficult. There is a way to make them work manually. So if anybody, to make them work automated. So if anybody wants to know about that, just let me know and I'll go find the documentation. It entails putting a listening channel in the mover itself, and then you basically just put a chat command in the Artiste to tell the mover to move when you press play, essentially. But yeah, when I did it, I just used both HUDs, the little choreography designer HUD with the little 3 buttons and the Artiste HUD, and it worked just fine. Any other questions? Let me just say, in all honesty, that this is a HUD that I've been using for almost 2 years now, off and on, and it really is worth it. I mean, Yummy has taken so many things that if you're not a scripter or you don't have a friend who is a scripter that can do things for you, that you can now do for yourself via the note cards. It just takes time to settle down and figure it out. Yummy is an invaluable resource. And she really does have the patience of a saint. That is no lie. I mean, I asked some of the dumbest questions. And at the time, I was so frustrated that you're just trying to figure out what to do. And then afterwards you think, oh, why didn't I say that? I knew the answer to that. But it is very easy to get frustrated. And so that's what I want to avoid. So I do mean it, when you have questions, if Yummy's not available, or if you want to just come straight to me, if I don't know the answer, I'll send you to Yummy. Don't get to the point where you're frustrated and want to throw it across the room, because that doesn't do anybody any good. So whenever you have questions, just let us know, and we'll be more than happy to help. Even if it's 2 a.m. tomorrow, Path. I probably won't answer right away, but I'll be more than happy to help. Okay, so everybody have, it can be a stress reliever. Everybody has their homework. Those of you that actually have the HUD, If you guys that don't have it, don't worry about the homework. You'll just get to come and watch everybody else next time. So we'll have class next Sunday again at noon. I will send out reminders through the group about 30 minutes beforehand. So, and in the meantime, like I said, if you guys have any questions at all, just let me know. Thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate it.